Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a third submission by Tine of the horse Hallmar, if I'm saying that correctly. And this horse has really come a long way, as have you both, since I saw this last. Starting to get a really nice stretch and a good rhythmic swing in the walk on the lunge here, without the help of any side reins or anything. So excellent work. Could be a little faster there, as you see, but he's starting to stretch into it. You know, and we always have to remember that when we're working these kind of horses that weren't necessarily um, bred for dressage horses, if you will, though I think all horses are in the sense that they have to work as best they can, if you will. And we have to do the best we can by whatever we have. But we have to look at these horses, you know, that are kind of little work-like horses. They're a little cold-blooded. They tend to have, when used in work, very often are used just in the walk, and or they're pulling something to that effect. So you have to really be patient with what you're doing in order to develop these horses into athletes, especially if they haven't been since the very beginning of their lives. But you're really doing a great job with this one. And when you do get one looking like an athlete, as this one is starting to look like, it really is amazing how much they change. But, you know, our expectations just have to be tempered by what the horse is to start with. I mean, just like we're starting with a child to teach him to be a baseball player. If he doesn't have the right build for it, well, it's not going to work very well. They can still learn to play it, though. However, doing the work that we do is more in line with, you know, everyone needs to be in shape, if you will, you know, in order to function in life well. So that's really how we want to think about our horses. What we're doing is we are the personal trainers for these horses, and you've done a good job of personally training this one, if you will. But I really like how the swing is coming along, especially when it gets a little deeper there. Now, he's not showing a lot of thrust up into the back, but he's showing a nice connection across the top line and swinging quite regularly, which was what will lead you to that. That is, him beginning to get a little more thrust up into the back and lift the front end. But that is actually starting to happen. Good walk here. I like it when he really releases the neck all the way down like that. And notice how he does, how it changes the walk, how the walk becomes more swinging and active. So we always want to do whatever we can to improve the gaits of the horse. So point being is, if we stretch them and it improves the gaits, why wouldn't you, of course? So you can see here, it's not bad, but not quite over his back yet. He's a little bit tight in the neck, not really letting him swing. We can see that his shoulders aren't really swinging very freely yet. And of course, remember that the shoulder, this free swing of the shoulder comes when the hind leg, when the thrust of the hind leg, as we were starting to see there for a couple of moments, when the thrust of the hind leg starts lifting the front end off the ground, then the shoulders just swing instead of pull. So when horses go in a kind of shortened stride, we have to look carefully and see if they aren't just pulling themselves along with the shoulders. And you can see as he pulls his neck back, we get more of a feeling of stabbing his front toes a little bit more. And that's precisely what he's doing. In other words, he's starting to drag himself a little bit more than propel himself. And I think that's also part of, you know, horses becoming domesticated and more domesticated, you know, and being raised in a much more closed environment, as most horses are these days, as most people just simply don't have enough space. Or they live someplace where you can't keep them outside, like some of you have who live in Sweden and Norway and these kind of places, and many other places where it's too muddy to have horses out around all the year round. And that's starting to swing nicely there. So we have to try to compensate for that as much as we can. And of course, we do that by getting horses to learn to work correctly and sort of inventing themselves, if you will, in their own minds, of getting in touch with how nature intended them to move. Now that started off really nicely there as he stretched deeper into that contact. There, like that. Now notice as he gets to that place, we get a little sense of a more round sense of how the legs are moving. as the front leg starts to swing a little bit more. And watch what happens when he goes into the stretch. Not quite there. And there it starts to look a little better. Now what you can do to affect that is start bringing, when he hollows on you like this and starts running, bring him closer to you, activate him a little bit, and as you see the back begin to come up and he starts to swing a little better, then let him out on the circle. Though you're getting it there, but you can see how he's going with his shoulder kind of outside the circle. So if you brought him a little closer to you when he does that, though that's looking quite good there. The important thing is getting there, isn't it? So that's starting to look nicer there. The shoulder's starting to swing a little more freely. And once we can get to that place, we just have to keep, we have to wait for the horse to develop some muscle, which takes time. But that was all really very nice, and without any contacts, any reins or anything, you know, he has learned to begin to carry himself in the correct position. And that will just continue to improve. And that's why we don't want to hold horses up. If we hold them up with our hands or with draw reins or whatever the case may be, you know, that's where they stay, and they're going to stay hanging in your hands until they get behind the bridle, where you can't really get real contact any longer, where they just hang behind the bit and drop their jaws off of the contact with the bridle. Many people today who think that their horses are light, the horses aren't in fact light at all. They're actually just behind the bit. In other words, they've learned to relax their lower jaw off of the contact, not relaxing it in the right way and keeping a correct feel, but to actually just disengage the jaw, if you will, when you take contact. Which is why people started resorting to, you know, tight nose bands and all of these kind of things to try to rectify a problem that can only be corrected by correcting the back of the horse. Now, starting off, this walk is starting to look pretty nice. It's a pretty good regularity. I'd like to see it a little deeper than it is here, and it does get there here in a bit. But that's starting to look good. I like how he reacted to your leg there and came a little bit more forward when you touched, and that's what we want to have happen. So at first, the leg should just mean to activate forward when we touch with the calves of our legs. And then later on, as we begin to get underneath the horse a little bit, notice that your leg hangs in a nice place. You might say this horse is a little bit small, but actually your leg is in a good place for him. These horses have big bodies. So your heel is just, if you look at you walking away, that's where I would like it to be. I'm a very tall person, so I'm fortunate enough to be able to wrap my legs around just about any horse. But if you can't do that, it's not very safe. You can see how nicely your legs were draped around the horse there. If the horse were to buck up into the air, that fact that they're draped, you know, quietly around the body of the horse will keep you on. That's why it's so important that you choose a horse for yourself to ride. Not only can you not really ride them very well if your leg doesn't come down below what I call the break of the median line of the side of the horse, because you can't ask them to lift their backs if you can't do that. So when you go out to buy a horse, we always want to be able to get I'd rather be able to have somebody be on a horse that's slightly small than too big, if you will, because that's just not safe. If your legs don't come down below that median line, and you see, once again, this is a good example of that. You can see her legs are draping around the horse. And I like how I'm watching your legs just swing in and out as you're going. That's exactly what you should do in a relaxed manner. Just following the motion, emphasizing a little bit more when he starts to slow down, and you seem to be doing that really well. So in your lunge work, I would say the biggest thing is just to bring him a little closer to you when you're lunging, when he gets hollow, until he gets a little more over his back, and let him out. You got him there, but I think you could get him there a little bit quicker if you did that. So this is starting to look like a pretty nice working walk. I'd like him to drop his head a little bit there. It's starting to look nice there. So we're always looking for that place. You know, once we can get the good swinging walk with the horse in the stretch, then we just start experimenting with how high we can bring the pull without changing that nice swinging walk. Because we always know that every horse has a level of strength across its back, and as we lift the neck higher and higher, which we don't really have to lift it, it comes up all by itself as the horse develops. That's what you'll learn, is without very little effort on our part, the horse's neck just starts to be carried higher as the horse develops a more uphill stance as the withers have come up through the shoulders. And the horse learns to begin to move with its hocks bent a little bit, the three joints of the hind legs bent a little more, so that we get a little more compression and a little more thrust That's what we call collection, when that thrust begins to lift the front end off the ground a little higher. So not bad here at all. It's got a good sense of a rhythm to it. I'd like to see him a little softer in the jaw, but that's not bad. And I like how he goes into this. It's a little bit slow right here, so you'd like to ask him when you get to that point to open up that stride a little bit more, so we start to get a little more swing. So it's not just the nose down, but there you're starting to do that now. I get a good sense that you have a good feel for what you're doing here with this horse. Very, very nice. Good, and that was an appropriate turn. So I'm always looking to see that that rhythm stays the same, always remembering that if we lose the rhythm, we lose the gymnastic quality of the exercise. In other words, it wasn't any good. It didn't do anything. And always remembering why we do these things. You know, we don't shoulder in. I think people today get hung up on these exercises and they start doing things like shoulder ins and half pass like endlessly. And those exercises are very, very difficult on the horse's legs. The horses take a lot of sidewards torque on their feet and ankles and things like this. So it's not really something, you know, these lateral exercises were intended to engage the back when you lose it, not to do a half an hour of shoulder in at a time, which we see people doing in lessons all the time. Now this is getting to be a really nice stretch in that walk here. So always remembering, as soon as it loses the rhythm and you lose the thrust in the back, there's no point in continuing. You know, if your horse is at a certain level, the shoulder in will help you to regain that. But if the head and neck has come too high and you lose it, it's just never going to happen. And now you're going to have a horse that's just stiffening against your hands, trying to do some kind of, you know, forced shoulder in, if you will. So it all has to keep that rhythm. And you're doing a really good job here of keeping that rhythm. I'm really getting a nice sense of that you have a good sense of what you're doing, and you're taking the horse through a program here and you're developing it slowly as you're going through your ride, and that's exactly how it should be done. The biggest thing that I learned from Nuno Oliveira, because I said many of you have heard me talk about this before, by the time I was riding with him, or most people of my generation were, he really was not riding in the way he had once, because he really physically couldn't do it any longer, and it was a bit confusing to people. It took me years to sort of figure out, you know, what was really going on there, you know, and what was right about it and what it wasn't. But what he was though, the one thing I really did learn from him, he was very methodical about how he went about handling horses and the groundwork and starting babies, which was mostly what was the most interesting to me thing to do. And his son, of course, rode most of those, and it always looked very different because his son would be literally looping him in the arena in terms of the level, the speed that they were going and how active their horses were. But he was so systematic about what he was doing. My point being is that that's what I really noticed for the first time, how systematic. And then I started working with other trainers, you know, people who were successful racing trainers and jumping trainers and all kinds of trainers. And the ones who were any good at all had a system that they worked by. They didn't just go at the horse like trying to pound it into the ground to make it do something. They understood that there's a foundation that we have to get through. But this is looking really good. I love how this walk, he's coming up nicely in the walk, staying pretty calm, pretty supple in the mouth right there. Looks really nice. And I love how that walk right there is really a pretty perfect working walk for this horse. That's really nice. Now right there is excellent. That's exactly where I'd like him to be. That's a good working walk for this horse at its level of development. That's a really good corner, appropriate for this horse at this level. I think we always have to remember to make things, you know, appropriate for the horse that we're working with. If we're working, you know, with, you know, a runner or something, we don't suddenly expect them, if they're just started running, to run a marathon. Well, people kind of do that with horses. They kind of think, oh, it's a big, strong horse. It should be able to do this, and it should be able to do it over and over again. Well, it doesn't really work that way. So once again, like using the lateral work, we use the lateral work to help us for a few moments, get the horse back up, and then we let it go straight again. So the goal is not to go sideways. The goal is to go efficiently straight. So we only want to use the lateral work when we need to. Of course, if we're showing and competing, we have to do it at a certain point. But if you're showing and competing, those things should all be very easy at the level that you are doing them, or you shouldn't be doing them at that level. Nice walk here. Gets a little slow at times, but I really like how he's stretching forward for you. I like how you are reestablishing the rhythm each time that you lose it. You have a really nice position. Your back is straight. Your leg is hanging underneath you. So all of that is looking really good. It looks correct without being stiff. And that's the hardest thing about all this. We can force ourselves into a position on the back of the horse, but if we stiffen ourselves in the process, then it's very hard to do anything, to communicate with the horse. So we have to learn to hold a position, but without stiffening our bodies against the movement. That's why, of course, it's so important that a horse be up to the back when we're doing something like a sitting trot, because then the horse can lift you and you can lock into the horse. Good walk here, stretching. So really good walk work. I really liked that a lot. You really had some moments and really got to a very, very nice working walk with this horse. Now you can see with this horse, it's really pretty good right there. And once again, it's what you're working with here. I mean, for this horse, I think he's going about as good as you can get him to go right there. There's times where he's still pulling with his front end. Now, right there, coming through that corner, he starts to look a little better and starts to swing a little better. So that's looking all better there. He just hasn't developed much thrust up into the back yet, but this is what will develop it. And we can see he starts to swing a little more freely as he starts to let the neck out a little bit. You can see once in a while he takes a step where he kind of struggles a little bit and pulls a little bit with the front end. But once again, that's not bad for him. Just don't keep him up in that upper position too long. He still needs quite a bit of work in that all the way down in that stretch in order till we start to get a little more lift off the ground. That's basically the thing that I see. But everything you're doing here is really in the right direction, if you will. And the last little clip in the dark is rather interesting as we get to that. But we can see, it looks like the arena that you're in has a little bit up and down to it. And we can see he struggles once in a while going up the uphill part. He starts to pull a little bit more. But that's really quite nice there. He starts going into a better stretch. Nice there. Now that's really good. Now that's where I feel like he's moving the most freely, is about right there. He starts to get the pull up much higher. So I think he's got a ways to go. As I said, right about there is where he looks about the best. But when he's a little shorter in the neck, he looks like he's struggling and pulling a little bit with his shoulders. But just keep letting him back out to what you're doing, and it's going to develop. He's just beginning. I really love to watch these kinds of horses that, as I said, nobody thinks about as the big dressage horses that people see today. But look what you can do with them. Look how nicely this horse is moving, how deeply he's getting underneath himself. And he will just continue to transform. You're really just in the beginnings of what's possible. Nice there. He starts to get into the stretch. And of course, the way he's built and the level, when he stretches all the way down, he goes maybe sometimes a little on the forehand. But if it frees, then once again, you get enough action. So it's always going to be a little bit of give and take in that. And that's got to have some moments that are better than others. Now that's looking better up in that position now than when you started before. Really doing a nice job. Now sitting to the trot there, that's not bad at all. He's handling you pretty well in that. We can see he comes across there. He starts to see right there where you can see when the bottom of the neck kind of pops out. You can see him start to struggle and pull a little bit with his shoulders. So he's ready to do that, but not too much of it. As I said, he still needs to go back to that longer stretch where I showed you before when I said that was really the best. And that's exactly what you're doing, is coming back to that. And that's just what you want to do. Now that, once again, there, right there, that looks a little better. So it's more like that height of the head and neck is about right for him at this moment. That will all change. And the canter's really quite good. It's not disconnected. He's rolling pretty nicely over his back. I have noticed that very often this type of horse canters better than it trots in the time. I think they just weren't really bred much for trotting, but they seem to canter, some of them, a little better. And once again, as long as you can canter over the back, it's all good and it will build muscle. The main thing is just not to canter horses when they're hollow. That just doesn't do anything but wear out their legs. So we have to have a certain level, and this is certainly a nice level that you've gotten to here with him, where he's staying pretty nicely over his back, carrying you. I mean, the gait looks nice and 3-beat. So the big advice for you I have is keep doing just what you're doing, because you're doing a very good job, and keep letting it develop. Keeping your eye on these points that we always talk about, the rhythm. Is he maintaining the rhythm? Am I losing it? Am I losing his back up underneath me? Am I keeping it when I ask for more difficult things? But once you learn that idea of, as you are doing here and have done throughout this exercise, of always coming back to the stretch, whatever little stress we may have put on them, it just kind of wipes away and once again lets the muscles begin to develop, and we try it again the next time. The biggest thing for people to get over with horses is just not get out of this mentality that, we're going to make it, we're going to fix it. It's like we can put a plug in and it's going to be different. It doesn't work that way, and too many people. And so people will pound and pound away at making horses do some sticking issue until they kind of forcibly do it. But it really doesn't teach the horse anything, and it makes them hate whatever it was that you were doing. So it's usually not the right effect. That's not to say that there isn't ever a moment that we have to discipline a horse. Certainly we do, but we have to be sure that when we do, that it was something that's worthy of discipline. That is, they actually didn't do something rather than couldn't do something. So once we understand that. All in all, though, you're really doing a nice job with this horse. I'd like to see his neck out in front of him here. This canter maybe went on a little longer than I would like it to. He started with a little bit stiff in this one, in this direction. Not quite as good as the other way, but not bad. I'm not saying not to do it. I'd like to come back. He's just holding himself a little stiff there. And just know that all that improves. The more we improve the trot work, the more the canter will just improve all by itself there. But as I said, he's just a little stiffer in this direction. The other direction, he was rolling a little bit over his back. So that doesn't mean do more of the bad part, the part that's more difficult. In fact, do less of it. Because what that tells you is it's a strength issue. It's not doing more of the same thing. It's doing the other things that will build the strength and to enable that to happen. A thumb in the camera there. Good. I like this trot you're coming back to. So once again, it got that canter. Was not a great canter for him. Not bad. I wouldn't say don't do it. I would maybe done a little less of it, and just know that that's going to continue to get better as he improves. But you've really done a great job with this horse, and just love what I'm seeing here. Of course, we'd like that walk to be a little bit deeper in the end. We always want to finish with that nice, long, swinging walk, like that. It's always where we start and it's where we end. Warm up and warm down. Very nice there as he starts to get a little deeper. We see the walk begins to swing a little better. But you see he was getting a little tired by the end of that last canter work. So that was a good place to end your session for that day. As we can see after that canter, as I say, the end of that canter a little bit stiff, like, okay, I'm a little tired. But he's starting to come back a little bit here. The swing is getting better in the walk. That looks nice coming down through there. So really good job. I look forward to watching this horse improve. Hey, and that's starting to look quite nice now. And we can see it's starting to slow down. He's still pulling with his shoulders there a little bit more than I'd like him to do. But that will continue to develop as he gets stronger over his back. But I like how it's slowed down there. He's trying to lift a little bit, but of course, he's not a horse that's built with a huge, flexion ability in that back end. He's a little bit straight like most of these horses are. But there, that's starting to look really good. Right in there, there you go. Now that's starting to look really nice. That little bit there, we start to see a little bit of lift through the withers. He doesn't look so heavy on the front end, if you will. But of course, remember, they're always going to start on the front end. They have to. There's no, to a lesser or greater degree, their conformation, but and how they've been bred or rather raised. But anyway, great work. I look forward to seeing your next one. Keep up the good work.